the 16-year-old who invented Tootsie Rolls. Hearing the word Tootsie must bring water to your mouth. After all, it was one of our favorite snacks. But there is more to its history than just being a delicious treat. Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to tell you the story of one of our favorite childhood snacks. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Tootsie Roll and how the wonderful treat came to be. And it also played an important part in the American war effort. To learn more about this, stay tuned till the end of the video. Tootsie Rolls are chocolate candies that come in the form of a cylindrical log and are named for their distinctive shape. This chocolate confection resembles taffy and typically comes in the shape of little logs. Tootsie Rolls come in a variety of sizes, the most common of which are the miniature and standard varieties. This candy has a rich chocolate flavor and is extremely chewy, making it ideal for on-the-go snacking. Ever since its introduction in 1896, Tootsie Roll has amassed a massive fan base. The Tootsie Roll's success led to the creation of a similar candy called Tootsie Pops, which has now achieved similar success comparable to the original. Now let's talk about its origin. The conventional history of Tootsie Rolls has it that Hirschfeld invented the confection in 1896, produced and wrapped each one by hand, and sold them out of his Brooklyn store. 1 year later, he merged with Stern and Sahlberg after witnessing their success. But there are so many iterations of this story, so we're only going to talk about the one we believe is true. Leo Hirschfeld will always be known as the man who invented the gummy bear. However, he was also an innovator, creating new kinds of candy and confections as well as innovative tools. Patent number 530,417 was for a machine depositing confectionery into molds. Patent number 543733 for a bonbon dipping machine, and patent number 543744 for a novel fork for dipping bonbons. They were all granted to Leo Hirschfeld by the United States Patent Office in December 1894 and July 1895, respectively. The 1890s were a golden age for candy manufacturing machinery, as profits in the industry were directly proportional to production rates. The value of a patent depends on its quality. U.S. Patent Office records show that in 1894 and 1895, Leo Hirschfeld granted Julius Stern and Jacob Sahlberg 50% of each patent. Romanglion jelly powder was a bestseller even before the company started making Tootsie Rolls. Near the turn of the century, jellied sweets became increasingly popular. We only know of Jell-O, but in the early 1900s, there were other brands like Jellicon, Trifora, and Bromagellan. Who then was responsible for creating the pink powder that, when mixed with hot water, turned into a delicious fruit jelly? Well, of course it was Hirschfeld. Stern and Sahlberg had a lot of business with Bromagellan in the late 1890s and early 1900s. One of the earliest convenience meals to revolutionize 20th century American cuisine was jellied dessert powders like Bromagellan. To make the dessert now required nothing more than a cup of hot water and a creative mind, and the various uses that material could serve. The recipe and full-color graphic for shredded wheat biscuit jellied apple sandwich, which called for soaking the shredded wheat in Bromagellan to astonishing effect, appeared in an ad for shredded wheat biscuits in Good Housekeeping magazine in 1900. Recipes for nut Bromagellan, Bromagellan snow pudding, and orange sponge all called for Bromagellan as an ingredient in the early 1900s. Despite its widespread popularity in the early 20th century, Bromagellan has since been phased out of production and use. A dedicated employee, Hirschfeld rose through the ranks at Stern and Sahlberg Company. Hirschfeld is initially mentioned as one of the 3 directors for Stern and Sahlberg in the 1904 edition of the Troe Co-Partnership and Corporation Directory of New York City. But it didn't mean Leo stopped thinking about the sweets universe. Instead, he persisted onward with his mission. He planned to introduce Austrian chocolate to the United States. Leo's first difficulty was adapting to the New York City summer heat, as the traditional Austrian chocolate bars he was used to creating quickly melted into a sticky liquid. More importantly, if you were to mass-produce candy bars, the vast majority of them would be damaged by the same heat during transportation. Leo's initial motivation for developing his heat-resistant chocolate-like confection was to satisfy his want for chocolate. So that the final product could be sold at a price that a child could afford, he also made himself use less expensive chocolate alternatives. Leo spent months perfecting a chocolate concoction in his laboratory. It had the appearance and texture of taffy or caramel, but tasted like chocolate thanks to an artificial flavoring. The candy he invented was dubbed the Tootsie Roll. after his pet name for them. His daughter Clara, who was often called Tootsie, inspired the name. The Tootsie Roll was a big success in New York, and for all the reasons he had hoped. This tiny chocolate treat was a hit with kids and adults alike, since it could withstand being carried around in a pocket on a hot summer day without losing any of its flavor. The small candy business Leo opened in 1895 was too small, so in 1905 he expanded into a 5-story building. Near the end of Stern and Sahlberg's tenure as president and CEO, Hirschfield was promoted to vice president, and the company's name was changed to Sweets Company of America. In 1920, after either being let go or resigning, Hirschfield established Mel's Candy. 1921 was a terrible year for him. He had to put his wife into a sanitarium since she was gravely ill. Hirschfield, too, had gastrointestinal problems due to illness. At the Monterey Hotel on 94th Street and Broadway in Manhattan on January 13, 1922. He took his own life by shooting himself. He left a note for his lawyer and said, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help it." Hirschfield had passed on, but the legacy he had would continue. The company first appeared on the New York Stock Exchange open market in 1922. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl saw the rise in popularity of one of Leo's creations, the Tootsie Pop. Tootsie Pops were produced during a time when all Americans were experiencing unprecedented financial hardship. They were a cheap and enjoyable delicacy that helped brighten an otherwise gloomy period. While their product was well-liked, the Sweets Company of America went bankrupt in the 1930s along with the rest of the American business sector. By 1935, Bernard D. Rubin had replaced Leo Hirschfield as president of the corporation after a hostile takeover. After taking office, one of his first orders was to expand the size of the Tootsie Roll. He also made a few adjustments to the recipe to make it taste even more like chocolate. In 1938, he relocated the factories from Manhattan to Hoboken, New Jersey, where the cost of living and labor was lower. These moderate adjustments did much to revive the company's fortunes, but it was the Second World War that truly catapulted them to new heights. Each American serviceman in World War II received a package of Tootsie Rolls as part of his regular ration. The Tootsie Roll was the ideal snack since it could be enjoyed regardless of the weather. In 1935, when Bernard Rubin became CEO, the Sweets Company of America was bringing in $1 million annually. When adjusted for inflation, that came up to almost $17.3 million. Upon his passing in 1948, annual sales had reached $12 million. And after taking into account the effect of inflation, today that would be nearly $118 million. After Bernard's passing, the business was taken up by his brother, William B. Rubin. To the year 1962, William served as president. The helm was thereafter taken up by his daughter. She was known by the name of Ellen Rubin Gordon. Melvin J. Gordon, for 12 years, was Ellen's spouse. He is the name that many would later come to know and love. The dynamic duo of candy experts led the rebranded Tootsie Rolls industry incorporated to unprecedented growth over the following half-century. Largely under Melvin's leadership, the company expanded rapidly, acquiring numerous well-known brands in the candy industry, including Sugar Baby Caramels, Sugar Daddies, Junior Mints, Dots Gumdrops, Charms Blow Pops, Cella's Chocolate-Covered Cherries, the Charleston Chew, Double Bubble, and many more. The Gordons throughout it all kept an extraordinarily tight ship and maintained a high level of secrecy. Tootsie Roll Industries, in contrast to the majority of publicly traded firms, never gave interviews to the media. Visiting a factory was like being asked to lunch with the Pope. Even the quarterly disclosures mandated by the SEC were brief and lacked necessary content. They did use some unorthodox approaches, especially for what appeared to be a lighthearted confectionery firm, but they paid off. The business reliably produced annual profits and dividends. They rejected many merger and acquisition offers from larger companies like Hershey's, Mars, and Nestle throughout the years. However, the World War wasn't the war that truly made this candy iconic. The event we mentioned earlier took place during the Korean War. In November of 1950, the People's Volunteer Army of China joined the fray in the Korean War. This news, which arrived on the 27th of November over the northeastern Chinese-Korean border, caught U.S. forces by surprise. American Marines stationed in the Chosin Reservoir region answered General Edward Almond. Nearly 30,000 coalition troops, including UN forces, participated in the operation. 120,000 Chinese forces, led by Zhang Xilu, quickly surrounded and overwhelmed them. By breaking free and retreating to Hungram, the United Nations forces inflicted considerable casualties against the Chinese, who were outnumbered but had better equipment and training. The remaining US Marines had to make their way through the harsh conditions of the terrain and frigid temperatures. The ground froze, the roads iced over, but most importantly, the equipment and weapons began to malfunction when the temperatures dropped to -38 degrees Celsius. This also had the unintentional consequence of increasing the danger facing the United States, since fuel pipelines in the tanks froze and cracked. They also began to run out of mortar rounds at the same time. They asked for more mortar shells as the situation became increasingly serious. Anti-aircraft systems had been dug up into the opposite side, and thus there was a delay while they were being neutralized. Using code language to get your point through was a pretty normal practice, and Tootsie Roll was the code name for mortar round. After the request was processed, the troops waited for the United States to be in a position to conduct airdrops. When they finally did, the soldiers on the ground discovered actual Tootsie Rolls. Imagine the surprise of these soldiers. Here you are waiting for some much-needed ammunition, but instead get a box full of candy. The situation may have ended badly, but resourcefulness and fast thinking prevented it. When they landed, the Tootsie Rolls looked like solid hunks of chocolate toffee. The Marines quickly learned that eating them caused them to melt in their mouths. With care, Tootsie Rolls were softened into a putty-like consistency and then used to plug fuel pipes. Unexpectedly, this proved effective. The extreme cold caused the sugary substance to solidify around the pipes, once again closing them. Once the tanks were operational again, the Marines made an attempt to flee. Although they lost many men, they were able to escape the Chosen River region. The lucky ones who made it out alive called themselves the Chosen Few. Well, that must have made for some pretty amazing war stories. After all, how often do soldiers get the chance to say they were literally saved by candy falling from the sky? So that's all the time we have for today, folks. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon on your way out. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.